Okay, let's go through the notes that you should have taken as we went through the lesson one reading. So, Mendel and HisPeas, early ideas about heredity. What is the passing of traits from parents to offspring? The answer is heredity. Excuse my penmanship. I'm learning how to use an Apple Pencil. Number two, in the 1850s, Gregor Mendel, an Austrian friar, G-R Mendel, performed experiments that helped to answer about how traits are inherited. Number three, what is the study of how traits pass from parents to offspring? The answer is genetics. And so here we see again the difference between heredity, which is the passing of traits, and genetics, which is the study of the passing of traits. So just pointing those two things out there. All right, letter B, Mendel's experimental method. So pea plants were ideal for genetic studies because they do what quickly? They reproduce quickly. And they have easily observed traits. And the experimenter can control which pairs of plants reproduce. All right, remember he did that by removing either the female or male part of the flower. Okay, number two, Mendel controlled which plants pollinated other plants. All right, and how did he do that? Well, when when a blank plant self-pollinates, it always produces offspring with traits that match the parent. So when a true breeding is what we call that, a true breeding plant, we're going to learn in a later lesson, true breeding plant is called a homozygous. Okay, homozygous is another word for a true breeding plant because, oh, did not mean to do that, sorry. A true breeding means that they've only got one type of gene, okay, one type of allele or factor. They've either, they don't, for example, the purple flowering plants only have the purple flowering gene. The white flowering plants only have the white flowering gene. So they're homo, meaning only one, right? Homo meaning like, right? All right, so they have the same gene, two of the same genes. All right, let's go on to B. All right, so B, by what plants himself Mendel was able to select which plants pollinated other plants. So what did he do to the plants? He cross-pollinated them. So by cross-pollinating. All right, and number three, with each cross-pollination Mendel did, he recorded the traits that appeared in the offspring. All right, Mendel's results. Mendel's crosses between true breeding plants with purple flowers produced plants with only purple flowers. And let's see, crosses between true breeding plants with white flowers produce plants with only white flowers. Crosses between true breeding plants with purple flowers and true breeding plants with white flowers. Now we're looking at that F1 generation. Okay, this is what they're talking about, the F1 generation, the filial. F is for filial. It's the first, the hybrid, if you will. Okay, F1 or the hybrid generation. All right, so crosses between these two true breeding plants. So the true breeding plants with purple and the true breeding plants with white produce plants with only, and so we're going to see the dominant, only the dominant here. And so we remember that the purple flowers were the dominant. So with only purple flowers. The first generation purple flowering plants are called, again, hybrid plants. Hybrid or F1. All right, so number 4, when Mendel cross-pollinated 2 hybrid plants, now we're looking at the F2 generation, okay? When he cross-pollinated 2, when the 2 came together, the trait that had disappeared in the first generation always reappeared in the second generation. And this disappearing, reappearing trait is the recessive trait. All right. Let's go on to number 5. Mendel analyzed the data from many experiments on several different, we call those traits. He also noted a 3-to-1 ratio. We talked about ratios when we looked at that in the book. For example, purple flowers grew from hybrid crosses blank more often than white flowers. So, I guess they're saying there's 3 more times. There's 3 more times, right? So, if he had purple, 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 and white. And we're going to look at something just like this, which is called a Punnett square, in our next lesson. All right, so Mendel's conclusions. After analyzing the results of his experiments, Mendel concluded that 2 factors control each trait. And these factors are going to be called alleles. We also call these alleles when we talk about on the gene. Okay, so these 2 factors we'll also refer to as alleles. Number 2, Mendel also proposed that when organisms reproduce, each sperm or egg, contributes 1 factor for each trait. You could say here reproductive cell. Oops. You could also say gamete. You might say sex cell. Any of that would be acceptable. Number 3, a genetic factor that blocks another genetic factor. So the one factor that is overriding the other factor, we call that the dominant factor. So this is dominant. It is the blocker. It is the overriding factor. Okay. And then number 4, a genetic factor that is blocked by the presence of a dominant factor is called recessive. So for the second generation, Mendel cross-pollinated 2 hybrids with purple flowers. About what % of the time the second generation plants had purple flowers? It was 75% of the time. And these plants had at least 1 dominant factor. 25% of the time, the second generation plants had white flowers. These plants had the same 2 recessive factors. All right.